What's going on, my marketing people? Welcome to another episode of the show. Today, joining me from Hella Cocktails is one of their co-founders, Eddie Simeón. Eddie, how you doing?
Doing great. Thanks for having me here.
Man, I'm excited to chop it up. I know we talked a little bit off air about culture and how to set it and learning as your company's growing and going through, an exciting time. And I'm pumped to get into that. But before we do, I want you to, set the foundation for the listener, bring them in, tell them what's your story. I mean, Hella Cocktails, what is it? If you can give us that kind of 5-minute career journey to date, that'd be great. And then we'll hop in.
Gladly, and thank you for asking. So, Hella Cocktail Co. makes botanically inspired beverages and bar quality cocktail mixers. So, we kind of find ourselves at the intersection of the better for you movement and alcohol or alcohol adjacent cocktailing, which is a really interesting space to be in right now with everything that's happening in kind of the sober curious alcohol free movements. But we've been in business for 12 years now. And in that decade plus, we've seen the cocktail space evolve a lot. So when we got our start in 2011, really the scene was about going to craft cocktail bars, speakeasies. They were usually in the cities, more urban environments, usually downtown. And you could go get like a prohibition era craft cocktail there. And now the cocktail topic has grown so big that it even includes people that don't drink alcohol at all. So our approach has always been to create celebratory, inclusive cocktail moments. And in doing so, we've developed a portfolio of ingredients for making cocktails, ranging from cocktail bitters to crack and pour cocktail mixers, now to sparkling drinks. And the purpose is to inspire confidence so that people can celebrate more authentically. We can reach people wherever they want to be along the entire cocktailing spectrum. We started off just as a hobby. We were a group of buddies who loved getting together and barbecuing and making things from scratch. We were working on some ice cream sandwich formulas, thinking about going pro making ice cream sandwiches. But we just kind of struck on cocktail bitters for a lot of reasons. Some of it was just dumb luck that we chose a product that happens to have infinite shelf life, but we thought it was really topical and we looked at other cocktail bitters options in the market and we just didn't love the ingredient lists. And so we started making our own out of all natural ingredients and had a lot of fun kind of sourcing herbs and spices and the right kind of grain alcohol from various places. And the hobby kind of grew from there. In 2015, we launched cocktail mixers because we kind of wanted to amplify the low velocity behind bitters. Even though it's a fundamental part of cocktailing, you use very little in order to make a drink. And then a few years later, we became the preferred cocktail mixer of Delta Airlines. And following on that success, we started to bring in little amounts of outside capital just through angel rounds, and always had our sights set on continuing that story of velocity by launching a daily use bitters beverage that we call bitters and soda. So it's been an amazing journey. We still remain like the closest of friends, even though our relationships are like part brother, part business partner, and with all that's been happening with the last couple of years working fully remotely since the pandemic. I'm here in Southern California now. My business partner and best friend of 23 years is in Michigan, and our third co-founder, Joe Mari, lives in New York and has had some really interesting things happen in his career lately. So he rolled off the business as a full-time daily resource. He's still chairman of the company, but is now actually the principal of one of our strategic partners called Pronghorn. So there's a lot there. It's been a hell of a ride, but what started in a mason jar is now the only minority-led cocktail mixer brand distributed in all 50 states.
Cool. So I love that. Couple friends together, get this, solve your own problem first, get up on Delta Airlines. Now you're at this point working remotely. And we were talking a little bit. You said, the company is growing and you're at this point where you're hiring. So I'm interested, I guess, one, where does the company stand, like headcount wise? Not as a vanity thing. I'm just more like, how many people do you have to manage right now? And is there a hiring target?
We're pretty much at capacity for the year. We've had a very conservative approach to hiring. We really like fractional resources, at least in the beginning. Fractionals, this new topic that is not new by any stretch of the imagination, but it's kind of like the opposite of hiring service providers. So I head up our marketing, and so having contractors or freelancers working for us is kind of like the antidote to paying retainers to agencies, you know. But right now we're at a headcount of 6 plus 2 full-time co-founders, so there's 8 people on the team. And for 2023, we're pretty much capped just because we have very specific financial targets that we're trying to hit before we add additional headcount.
I love it. And that's that. It's an interesting part in your company, right? When you're going from you and just the other co-founders, where at least in my own experience, when I had to have my co-founders and we could like show up raggedy to the office when before we were, before we were remote. We'd like whatever. It was like I'm showing up in track pants and a t-shirt because who cares? We're all just the co-founders. And then we hired our first person and it became, oh, we need to like be here before that staff member. We need to have things a little bit more professionalized, right? How has that been for you? I guess like has that been a big change now as you've built a team when it comes to building culture, right? Things like how are you going about that? Because beforehand, I'm sure a lot of it was unspoken, right? Between you and the co-founders. Has there been anything that you've found that's worked or that has really been a cornerstone of building culture in the company?
So many things. You put it really well. We're 3 guys and we were 3 guys who were like buddies, so kind of like this self-selected group of fellas. And so of course in the early days, if there was a culture, it was just a reflection of how we like to hang, how we like to, you know we all took a leap from our careers to go do this. And so like you don't do that necessarily, or at least we didn't, to put on a suit and tie and go to work every morning. We wanted it to feel relaxed, welcoming. But yeah, there is that, even though we were always driven and, in order to make that leap and start your own company, it takes a certain degree of, I don't know, call it whatever you want to call it, naivete. I've called it an entrepreneurial seizure, call it passion and drive. But it got to the point for sure where we wanted to recruit. They say like as a founder, you want to identify your gaps and hire people who kind of fill those gaps, right? That's like what great leaders do is they build by assembling teams, grow by assembling teams. It served us too to recruit for people who were different than us. And so like our first employee who worked with us for 6 years was a woman. And I just think that like was a really important part of the vibe to balance out this kind of 3 guys in a garage culture, and now we have a pretty even split, female to male, and some goals when it comes to hiring diversity for POCs, people of color, yeah, on the executive level. But yeah, I
I
think
love
like
that.
it's a great question because everybody kind of in the very early stages of any business, especially I think in food and beverage, because it's such a kind of social convivial culture, it can feel really relaxed and casual, and you kind of come up with your own style for stepping into spaces that are a little bit more professional and formal. But as the company grows, you do have to start to have more structure, have more infrastructure, process, and what does that look like for you? And we're kind of being confronted with those questions right now.
Yeah, it's that the whole someone said it to me once, they're like professionalize your business. Like the club, you getting out of the clubhouse and like professionalizing it. And that didn't mean it had to be, less fun or less engaging.
True.
And
Totally.
I actually found it's funny. I thought that structure was going to be this thing that pushed people away because structure meant I was
Right.
working at Chase Bank, and I found it actually opposite that my staff wanted structure. They wanted to know what they needed to
Yeah.
do on what
Yeah.
times. Like it gave that clearer path forward. And we said this before off air. It's like if you don't say what needs to be done, what the company mission is, where you're going, how you're going to do it, and what the company stands for, everyone's open to interpret it what they think, and it'll just
Absolutely.
becomes, for lack of a better term, a clusterfuck, right? So it's like
If you
it's
let the
like
culture of your business go to seed, I find that it starts to become a reflection of the worst part of you, like the lowest common denominator of how you show up becomes the way other people begin to behave. So we started to implement these systems of accountability, and they're very collaborative. I think like the number one thing is like you don't want to be too diminutive, too prescriptive with how you hand culture down, but you're right. Highly productive people want goals. And so accountability and culture for us in a lot of ways is about this goal setting process. So the way we do it at the company right now, which has filled in a lot of those voids when it comes to cultural leadership, is first doing annual strategic planning. We really have one KPI for the entire business, and that's case depletions, right? So we do the due diligence, we calculate our forecasts for what we think is realistic based on certain assumptions, and then we have like a 3 day or week long process where we identify activities that will serve that goal over a 3 year, 1 year, and then 90-day period. We start with global organizational goals that we want to achieve. And then you can start to map an individual's job description against accomplishing those goals and come up with individual KPIs, right? And I found that the people with the most experience, the people who are the highest achievers within any organization, want something along the lines of a scorecard. They appreciate like a quarterly check in with leadership to say, how am I doing against the things that we agreed are my job? And in the absence of all that, they won't be motivated. They won't show up to work feeling energized to get stuff done or happy knowing that they're not really moving the ball forward.
Yeah, or they start doing things that aren't part of their job, right? Like I always think about things like, so I played college football. So I always think the offense's job was to score a touchdown. Okay, that's our goal, right? Touchdown.
Right.
But the offensive lineman's job is not to run the ball in. Their thing is get the blocks, the receivers catch the ball. Like,
Yeah.
and the minute your receiver is trying to throw passes, the offense is going to break. And I think that a lot of that can actually, that thinking can be applied to business too, to be like, oh, are people doing what they're supposed to help advance, the company's ball, so to
Right.
speak, right?
Yeah.
And to get us closer to that goal.
And what's so
So I love that
beautiful,
idea of clearly putting it
yeah,
out.
you're right. And I think this is also true about the three co-founders, me and my two business partners. When we can be collaborative, when our unique professional skills can be interconnected in a way, we do our best work, right? Like we met the onboard services buying team for Delta Airlines at Fancy Food Show. They were just walking the floor. We didn't know anything about becoming a supplier to a airline, let alone one of the largest airlines. But because we like worked at it as a trio, like there was a lot of late nights when we were doing proposals for Delta. We figured it out, and then, lo and behold, we won that piece of business. What the process that we've put, laid in place within the company allows us to do is allow for like similar behavior as you described, the different positions in a football squad, for there to be interdepartmental collaboration. So like, there's everyone says there should be very little daylight between sales and marketing. But what does that really mean? Or ops and marketing, right? Like, how do those two teams interface? And I think if you have kind of like a North Star set of goals that we know serves the business globally, and every division asks the question, what's my responsibility for moving those objectives forward? You can start to realize your role in relation to other people's role and amplify each other's productivity.
I love that. Yeah. And I love the having one major KPI, right? I think
Yep.
it's sometimes we get in, we work with organizations and I'm like, okay, what's the goal? And then there's 27 different goals, right? One is page traffic. And I'm like, well, why do you want more page traffic? Well, we want
Right.
more leads. Well, why do we want more leads? To get more sales. Okay, so the goal is more sales. Like, let's just cut
Sales.
through. Like,
Sales is the goal.
let's, the goal is not web traffic. Let's
Yeah. Right.
let's actually boil this down, right? No, I love that idea of bringing that forward. Is there anything y'all are like implementing with regards to? I know it's really popular to do like Entrepreneur OS or Clockwork, or I'm like doing Story Brand training right
Yeah,
now, just
we have our
going
own
through that
flavor of
too.
EOS. It's what it is,
Okay.
So this idea of 3 year, 1 year, 90-day goal setting is like the foundation of EOS. We came one like unique spin that we put on it to kind of sprinkle some hella flavor on top of EOS was we scheduled out bi-weekly all hands meetings for the entire year. So EOS has this agenda format called level 10, and every other all hands meeting we hold a level 10 agenda. And then every other all hands meeting, one of the company teams leads the agenda. So this week marketing will lead the agenda, and then we'll have kind of this like all level 10 all hands meeting, and then the following meeting operations will lead the agenda. And it's cool because you don't have to necessarily tell people like what you're working on this week. You can just explain to people what operations means to you, right? Like we're trying to evolve from being like a one warehouse distribution team to like a coastal distribution network. So we are standing up a warehouse on the East Coast and West Coast. And so just breaking down for the rest of the organization the unit economics, the level of effort, and the logistics behind doing all that is illuminating for people on the marketing team and helps us understand like, well, why shouldn't we run a promotion at 30% off during Father's Day? And if you can kind of answer that question for yourself, if you understand the value chain provided by the operations team.
That information's so pivotal, and I say that this is funny that you say this because I'm like having flashbacks and PTSD maybe. But we were working with a client and it was the same thing, beverage company, and we're like, oh, let's do this shipping 1 year, and then the operator informs us a year in that we're losing money on cases shipped to certain states. And I went,
Mm,
why wasn't this addressed at the top? Why didn't like we were told
yeah,
this was we got a blanket, we asked for the margin and we got a blanket response for the country.
right,
So I was like, oh, there's shipping. I assumed that there was coastal shipping in place and different regional center. No, it was all coming out of the Midwest and little things to go, oh, losing money on any shipment to California. Well, then why is it even in the marketing plan to do that? Like it
right,
was one of those like
right.
but I we didn't know until too late, and it's like, oh, you're burning money to get liquid to lips out here, but it's not creating a profitable customer. So it's
Yeah,
like that information, I love that, of like giving operations that, or whatever department, that
yeah.
platform to educate the rest of the company, can avoid little or big things like that, right?
Definitely. And what you had just said about this appetite for growth is central to everything in CPG right now, right? I think that's really tapping into how the economic climate or the pending economic climate is impacting high level business decisions for organizations large and small. What's your appetite for growth? At what cost are you willing to grow? You know, institutional dollars have finally tapped into this topic of profitable growth. And it's not necessarily an oxymoron. It just means like you don't see that hockey stick all the time. Like 15% year over year growth is a good thing. And we're proud to say that as a business that's, been around for more than 10 years, but only closed a Series A of funding within the past 6 months, if we weren't profitable quarter over quarter, the first thing to go would have been salaries, right? And so we had to act like a cash flow business. We had to act with a significant amount of discipline when it comes to profitability. And it changes the product, it changes the value proposition. Our products have always been designed to be on the more expensive premium end of the mixer cabinet for that specific purpose. And it's never been growth at all costs. We played that game a little bit last year at the perfectly wrong time. When customer acquisition in beverage went from like, $4 to $44. And, you know, Zuckerberg took our lunch money there. And so in 2023, it's totally different. We have pathways for people to discover the brand on the internet, but purchase the product in retail. And for brands at our stage, that's like the holy grail right now.
It's the fundamentals, right? Which is what you're saying when you are doing limited cash raise, you have to rely on business fundamentals, the
Mhm.
profitability and profitable growth, and it gives you a tool set where if there ever is a cash injection, there's a real business model. So many founders from 2010 to now, particularly, and I would say like CPG is kind of having its like SaaS moment a little bit the last 5 years. Like I was in software as a service marketing at first, and the
Mhm.
amount of money that was lit on fire because like profitability was like Voldemort. You just didn't say that word.
Right.
And it
Right.
is like we're shying away from this fundamental part of it. And I go, what the hell? This is crazy. So now I having that mindset, that scrappiness, whatever you want to call it, business fundamentals, I call it. It gives you the tool set to like if cash is injected, there's a model, there's a way to do things. It's
Right.
predictable. We're not just gonna like splash cash on something and cross our fingers, which was CPG was in a weird one there in like 2021. It's like a pissing contest to who could have the nicest Instagram. Like it was crazy. And I don't think it actually tied into that like driving velocity on retail, you know?
I can't be super analytical about what that all was, but I think like in broad strokes, our generation, I'll say, we're responsible for all this. There was a long period of time where we were living this millennial lifestyle on a discount because of
Hmm.
all the venture capital in the market. So we were getting Lyft and Uber rides across town. We were having our groceries delivered, and all that stuff was dollar for dollar a lot cheaper than the actual cost of the service. And then there's this crazy correction. People saw this great hope and opportunity in direct to, and I'm talking about CPG only now, in direct to consumer grocery. And it worked for 12 months or 18 months. And so, like, digital agencies started cropping up all over the place, calling them like performance marketers. Remember when it used to be called media buying? And then they started calling it performance marketing. Like like when CAC was achievable, CAC was like something along the lines of the cost of your first sale. And yes, it was okay for your first sale to be break even because the cost to retain that customer was still low. There was like this bubble in the like discounted advertising dollars, basically. So it's kind of like this attitude of running your business on a discount. And then that just completely evaporated. And so when we saw this, started to see the boutique banks like Clearbank or Wayflyer, everybody that was basically funding your direct to consumer CPG business on a shopping cart transaction basis, when they started to disappear, I saw like that was the writing on the wall. I was like, something very bad is about to happen in capital, and then we saw Silicon Valley Bank just kind of disappear overnight, and it's very difficult for businesses to receive lines of credit now. We've been shopping for a line of credit so that we don't have to spend down on the cash that we received from the Series A for like a year. And that's back to business fundamentals. We're just not willing to accept the 25% interest rate you would if you went with debt now.
It is interesting. You talk about like the millennial, like we were able to get everything at a discount from funding for our companies, but also just thinking about the consumer behavior of willingness to, spend $10 to DoorDash an ice cream to yourself. But you can do that when you're employed at Netflix making 200K. And then it's like every company starts a train of layoffs. I think I saw like Amazon packages in general for Q1 were down 5%. And it's like, oh, right. People just aren't spending as much. So it just makes sense to me that we're kind of having this moment of like clarity almost where everyone like has to
It is a moment of clarity. You're right.
get
I
real,
agree
you
with
know?
that. Yeah. I'm just glad that this moment isn't the same moment where aluminum can costs were so dire. Because remember when like the world ran out of aluminum for a second?
Yeah.
That was that was a real risk for our business, and so I'm glad that there's a silver lining to everything. And so even though the supply chain is still very difficult right now, that is at least eased up a little bit when it comes to lead times. But yeah, I think you're right. The people are holding on to their money. It's funny
Yeah,
because
there's a
like
lot of
the people who are like the largest generation right now remembers the 2008 financial crisis, right? And it God, I can't wait to read the history books about what this time in society like is
it's going to
perceived
be
as.
wild. It's going to
Fascinating.
be wild, and it's going to be wild to see, even 10 years from now to be like, whoa,
Yeah,
that was the wild wild west of just funding and like these companies and subsidized taxi rides essentially. And like Uber could never IPO because they were just subsidizing car like like all of this like wild stuff that was going on. And yeah, it'll be interesting to see. I'm with you too. Like I'm 35, so um you know seeing 2008 as a young adult, but then now being like,
you were in the job
okay,
market, like you were out of college,
yeah,
right? Like it was like,
yeah, it's like
yeah,
now
man.
this is like this is it's different, but reminiscent of like, oh, there's fear. It's not just cherries and roses. Where I feel like the last 5 years was
It's very
like,
different. Oh, there wasn't
yeah,
cash. There wasn't capital back then. Now there's like a lot of capital, just it's not moving around very much. We in order to kind of respond to all this, just to come back to the business a little bit, we have we've really pivoted from having an always on approach to customer acquisition and growth to being hyper focused on key moments throughout the year. And I think this is what smarter brands have done for a long time, and earlier stage brands are getting hip to, is like identifying those price reduction periods where you're partnering with your distributors, or key moments throughout the year that align with your brand ethos, and only investing your dollars in those moments of time. So of course it requires some creativity to, like, what do you talk about in April or August or September right before the busy season. So you kind of have to have this evergreen foundation of content to focus in and help to tell your story. But we are really hyper focused on dry January, the heritage months like Black History Month and Hispanic Heritage Month. We're doing a campaign for summer, and then of course holiday is the big drinking season. And so I think we're like kind of bringing it all full circle and talking about how the volatility in the market and the shift in consumer appetites for spending against CPG has impacted our decision making process. It's pushed us to be more targeted, and it's so far it seems to be going pretty well.
I like that. And that comes back to when you do those all hands, where if you can go from the leadership side or the marketing side and say, here's our plan, we're going to tie ourselves to these events, your seasons or holidays. And then people go, okay, cool. I know why we're doing price reductions in November around Thanksgiving. Got it. Like I don't have to,
Right.
and that makes sense. So everyone gets aligned. Eddie, this has been awesome, man. Before I let you go, let people know, one, where they can find Hella Cocktails, and then two, where they should connect with you online.
Oh, fantastic. I'll do the second one first. Please, we're on all the social media stuff. So on Instagram, it's at Hella Cocktail Co. All one word, no spaces, no dots. Hella Cocktail Co. HELLA Cocktail CO. You can always just Google search Hella Cocktail Co. and you'll find all of our stuff. Please look for our product nationally in Whole Foods. We have 2 SKUs approved in Whole Foods. It's kind of in the middle of the store with the sparkling mixers. Our bitters and soda is a phenomenal product. Both of the SKUs we have in Whole Foods are 0 sugar. But for the complete set of everything we make, you can go to Total Wine and More. So Total Wine and More carries all of our cocktail bitters, all of our mixers, and all 3 flavors of bitters and soda. And of course, if you aren't near either of those retailers, you can always purchase on Amazon.
All right, man. Thanks for coming on the show today. I appreciate it.
Jordan, it's been a pleasure. Thank you.
Beautiful. And if you want to go check out any of those links that were mentioned, we will throw those in the show notes. As always, I'm your host, Jordan Shelton, and I'll catch you next time.